the, gosh, what day is it?
December 11th.
December 11th, Planning Commission meeting. And you don't have an item here for addenda changes.
I do, it's after the first item though.
Okay,
which
then.
We can't see because there's a large plant obscuring the screen.
There is,
I thought that was a map.
yeah. It's a very, very interesting map. We could actually move that if you like. We could,
Here,
yeah,
You could hold it.
Kate's not here, so we can utilize her table for the goodies.
Yeah,
and
I know. I know. If people viewing live had a look at what that cheesecake looked like, they really,
Maybe some people were on
driving
the meeting.
in as we speak. So Joe, we're recognizing Joe for stepping down after 22 years on the Zoning Board of Adjustment and the Planning Commission. And, yeah, so we have a plant.
You get a plan.
We have a card.
Yeah, so did everybody sign the card so Joe could have it? So we have a card, we have the plant. We have, the coolest thing is what Barbara made, but we also have some photographic artwork, a fall foliage scene in Hinesburg that came from one of the pictures submitted for our community calendar back in 2010, so
Thank you so much.
something to hang on the wall. We used to do plaques, and then I thought, wouldn't it be better to have a cool photographer?
That's really Hinesburg.
That's really
Yes.
Hinesburg. Those are
Yeah.
the Russell trails, so James should know those well. Fall foliage season. So yeah. So Joe, you joined the town in 1997 on the Zoning Board of Adjustment, which you've been here so long that board doesn't even exist anymore. It was done away with.
I closed it.
Yeah, that's right. You closed it down. Yes. So for those of you that don't know, Hinesburg created the Development Review Board. Actually checked after dinner tonight. It was 2002 was the first meeting of the DRB. So that's about when it happened. Same year I got here, but earlier in the year. In any case, when the DRB was created, all of the development review functions were consolidated in that board. So the Zoning Board of Adjustment that Joe served on prior to that used to handle variance requests and conditional use requests and appeals of zoning administrator decisions. And the Planning Commission had to handle subdivision review and site plan review for new businesses. And so it was a bifurcated review process, and some projects had to go before both boards to get, the approvals needed for a single project. And so in 2002, we consolidated that, and the Planning Commission became just a policy board and not a quasi-judicial review board. And that's when Joe lost his prior board and jumped ship and came to the Planning Commission. And you've been here ever since. 17 years of planning. Yeah, that's a long time. And served as our chairman for
Yeah, how many
a
years?
very long time. I think after Gene Isham
Yeah.
left, you took on the chair position and held it until just last year, right?
Right. I have no idea how long that was.
I don't either. I know your dates of service, but I didn't look back to see how long you were chair. But there were many town reports that I remember you drafting, and various select boards, of which I see current and former members here, that you had to come and, talk about what the Planning Commission was up to one way or another.
Joe was also a very important part of the Lot 15 committee, did a lot of the drafting of our recommendations, our study during that 1 year plus period.
2010, 2011.
Yeah, yeah.
And he also had to deal with annoying Conservation Commission members when we were drafting the rules.
One of them in particular.
You
Yes.
did. You were, and I did.
You
Part of the
were and I
job.
did.
In fact, not to go too far down memory lane, but I seem to remember a particular meeting in this room in which a certain Conservation Commission member raised an idea that then required us to adjourn the meeting to the main hall because we had so many people standing in the hallway. Do you remember that meeting?
I do
You
remember
remember that meeting, yeah. I don't think you were chairing that one, so Gene got to do that one.
Yeah.
But so, anyways, you've seen a lot in 22 years. Any observations you want to make, or prognostications, or otherwise?
You know, I think it's been a great run. 22 years, it's been great. I learned a lot. I'm a changed person because of my time on the board. I hope I'm a little more even keeled, and you know, I'm so happy to have served with just an immense number of great people that really just want the town, you know, to be the best it can be. And we all have different points of view. And you know what I've learned is if we listen to each other, we'll all be in great hands. You know, we'll come to the best solution together. And I'm really kind of sad leaving. I didn't think I would be, but as the time got closer, I'm kind of sad, and I'm kind of, you know, second guessing my decision. I still think it's a right one after 22 years and freeing up the seat for somebody else. But I know that I leave this board in, you know, great shape. I mean, just a terrific set of commissioners, and you know, I think the town is gonna do so well underneath your care. Thank you for continuing to be here.
I have a little bad news for you. The subcommittee on contractors' yards, the commission is just starting to look at that proposal,
Yep.
so we might invite you back to,
I've
because
told
it's
you
gonna take
before
us more
that
than one meeting.
it's not like I'm leaving the town or leaving the state. I'm here, this is my home, you know, and I'm available for special projects. I am available, you know, if you want to tap me on the shoulder and say, you better come to this meeting, you know, as part of the public, because you got us into this. So, no.
Yeah, I will say that I'm a little saddened that you're leaving because you have provided a lot of leadership over the years, and I've enjoyed, you know, working for you. But from a purely selfish standpoint and historical standpoint, you are the continuity with the past on this commission. Certainly my past. You're the only commissioner who was here when I came on board. And I'm just double checking. Let's see here. Yes, so when I look back at when all of the rest of you started, Maggie is the next longest serving commissioner, and you started in 2012. So back when I first came on in 2002, we revised the town plan, and then we set about this village growth area zoning, which was kind of a big deal. And we adopted that in 2009. And the moment that you step off this board, there is not another commissioner who was present for that, for those discussions. So you'll have to trust me, the rest of you, when I say it was like this. This is what we meant back in 2009.
Just invite Joe.
You might need to invite Joe to come back, yeah, to fact check all that. Anyways, it was a long time, and thanks for all your service.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
It's really been a pleasure.
So the other item that Barbara has for you, you want to show it off? We still have to. Everybody has to sign it, but
Yeah. I mean, we recognize your efforts as a chef.
that's right. Being a planning commissioner is one thing.
Yeah.
Bringing gourmet baked desserts, you know, basically once a month or every other month to meetings, that's even more important.
Are we gonna make him?
Yeah, I think I have
We're
to.
gonna make him wear it?
Yeah, I think you gotta stand up and,
Thank
you know,
you.
show that one off.
Thank you.
Oh, it's reversible. Oh, Barbara.
Yeah, how about that? I was confused.
If you like stripes, it's one side. If you don't, it's the other.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's the right size.
That's remarkable.
So Barb brought the fabric markers, so we all need to sign that thing
All right.
before Joe walks
All
out
right.
here
That's so
tonight.
sweet. Thank you. There you go.
Just got a camera.
Yeah, can we take a picture of this?
Actually, that's a very good point, except I don't have mine with me. Somebody must have their phone on them. Quick, take a picture of Joe. Stand up again, Joe.
All right. Can I, then send this to Ann Thomas for the town report? Oh, I could do a thing like that?
Yes, you would.
Yes, I totally would.
Potholders, potholders.
File. Oh, yeah, potholders. Okay, very good.
Joe, over here.
Beautiful.
There you go.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for posing.
all right.
That can be your campaign picture when you run for select board.
I was telling Joe on the way back, I'm like, you know, we had a select board hearing the other week, and it was a nice thing to have 3 former planning commissioners on the select board. It seems to be a bit of a stepping stone there.
All right, let's stop embarrassing Joe and move on.
Thank you, everyone.
I really appreciate tonight. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you for
Thank you,
dinner as
Joe.
well.
So,
That was awesome. Okay, then.
Now you can do agenda changes.
Now we can do agenda changes. Does anyone have any changes to the agenda? Is anyone here to comment on an item that is not on the agenda? Yes, young man in the back row.
Thank you. Robert Hyams, Conservation Commission. I have one item that is on behalf of Conservation Commission. First of all, just to let you know that the natural resource inventory that you helped, in the early planning stages is underway. And so at some point, probably in early winter, or not early winter, early 2020, we'll be asking the Planning Commission to participate in a presentation from our contractor, Jess Moore. So I'm just kind of putting that out there for you guys, that we are moving ahead with that. And then the other thing, this is more as a citizen, not on behalf of the Conservation Commission, but conservation related. There is a lot of development pressure going on in sort of the La Platte-Patrick Brook corridor. And it's interesting in that you have a large development proposed on the, basically the north bank of Patrick Brook and on the south bank of Patrick Brook. And I'm guessing that they are not, whatever the buffer, there'll be some kind of buffer requirement imposed on the development. But I think what would be really helpful would be to have sort of a corridor-wide plan that, really, took into account what was going on in Patrick Brook, what was going on with both those developments, what's going on in the La Platte, what's, is there a time ever to deal with that funky little flow that goes around, that does the 90-degree turn around the ball field, that's dumping loads of sediment into the La Platte. Anyhow, with all this development pressure, with all this development activity going on there, would this be the time to do that? And I'm just kind of putting that out there as an idea. I don't know if the Planning Commission, is in position to consider anything that impacts these developments which are going before the DRB, but certainly it's something to consider for the future, because obviously, it's not going to be the end of pressures on our river corridors. So just kind of putting that out there.
What is the ball field that you're referring to?
So, that, have you ever been, so the Bissonnet Fields, right, there's that flow, I think it actually has a name, the one that the one that comes down from CVU and then does the 90-degree, it flows west along the north edge of Bissonnet Fields and does the 90-degree turn. And it's incised, it's a head cut, it's just dumping at every rain event, it's dumping loads of sediment into the La Platte. So if ever there was a time to deal with that, maybe this is it.
Are you saying the baseball field dumps sediment into the La Platte?
I don't know if it comes out, no, I don't actually think it comes from the baseball field. I think the fields itself are, they're pretty stable. I think it was sort of done, I don't know if that course predated the fields or not. It may have, and it may just be sort of a legacy of something. But anyhow, it's dumping a lot of sediment. I think it's picking it up more from sort of that no man's land between the development along Shelburne Falls Road and the ball field. I don't think it's coming off the ball field.
Yeah.
Yeah, my impression is that it's largely just stream bank erosion that's happening within the channel, and because it's so straight and doesn't have an opportunity to get out of its channel during a heavy event, it just incisors down deeper and eats away more of the stream bank.
I mean, it's a classic head cut too. I mean, it's, as it goes, if you were to follow it upstream towards 116, you just see it's getting deeper and deeper and deeper. It's really deep. So, but the whole system, that whole corridor, the La Platte corridor, Patrick Brook, and that stream, could really use attention, and it could use, I don't think it necessarily has to be a big elaborate restoration plan, but as all these other things are going, as these developments are going into place, it would be nice to have sort of a common vision of how we can improve the functions and values of that stream, and which is also an important wildlife corridor as well. So instead of one side doing one thing, the other side doing another, and the La Platte continuing to take the heat for what's going on upstream. And at some right, I mean, we keep saying this, but at some point we're going to be held accountable for water quality issues in the La Platte.
It seems like something, Bob, that the Conservation Commission could actually provide some leadership on, because it's not necessarily a regulatory fix or solution that might need to happen. I think it's more of a management of those waterways, and who's going to take some responsibility to allow them to access their riparian areas. We have pretty robust stream buffer protections within the village growth area that both keep structures away from these streams, but also is supposed to require that those areas be allowed to revegetate to sort of natural woody vegetation.
I don't know how much time you want to take on this. I know you guys have lots of time, but buffers, that's a nice start, but more should be done. I mean, right now, in fact, when you talk about revegetating, if you have a straightened stream such as Patrick Brook, and it's highly vegetated, there is some nice vegetation in there. It's not, but what you're actually doing is you're sort of armoring that bank, and it's sort of locking into that straight channel. So sometimes it's more than just looking at vegetation, at riparian vegetation. It's really kind of having a vision, which encompasses not just the banks, but also what the stream channel is doing, and that may require some cooperative management, not just what BlackRock's doing, and not just what whoever's to the south is doing, but something that's a little more integrated.
Sounds like a great partnership project between the Conservation Commission and the Lewis Creek Association to bring something forward.
But it's almost like we need, even like a river corridor utility or something that designates these river corridors as, I don't know. I know they do have protections, but maybe even something that acknowledges that, they should be managed, in a sort of holistic, integrated approach. I don't know, I mean, honestly, our conservation conservation commission is thin.
Well,
and-
that's why the
and-
town as a whole often relies on our watershed groups to help sort of
Yeah.
push these ideas
Yeah.
forward, because they're all about those ideas and have
Yeah.
more time and resources to apply. But, you know, giving them a little poke in that direction might get Lewis Creek to put it on their radar.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, but anyhow, maybe it could be, you can find a little smidgen in your radar for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, beyond organizing with Lewis Creek, I'm wondering if it makes sense for the town to compile, you know, a list of hotspots that we need to think about, you know, as the DRB views, you know, subdivision and development. You know, things have no chance of being dealt with, if they're not known.
Yeah, and it's
And-
really, it's interesting, there's so many, you know, there's a number of entities that are actually working on doing things on the Platte. I mean, I was at a meeting at TNC, and I ran into somebody, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Ryan Crean, he's doing something there. TNC is actually doing something there, you know, the county forester, Ethan Tapper, is doing something there. Yeah, so I mean, but somehow it's like we need like something to pull it all together, so we know what we're doing, so at least we're working towards a common agreed, you know, set of principles.
So sometimes our annual funding opportunities gives us a chance
Yeah.
to go after projects that we are toying with. Right now, the Regional Planning Commission is soliciting ideas for their unified work plan for the next fiscal year that starts on July 1, and they're asking for proposals from municipalities and nonprofit groups and all the rest of that. I think by mid to late January. And so at the select board meeting on Monday, we mentioned briefly that was coming, and that I'm just thinking this might be a project we might want to propose to get some consultant horsepower and maybe
Yeah,
some
and-
regional planning expertise involved.
Right, and I think I think our natural resource inventory to a certain extent will, you know, identify some of these issues, so that'll be a start. But yeah, it would be great to get like a town-wide river, surface water, you know, management initiative.
Do you think that the Conservation Commission could contribute to preparing such an overview? I mean, I know you're short on folks, but you have an interest and knowledge about these kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think so. Sure.
I know you're not representing
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Conservation Commission, but
Mhm.
as a member,
Yeah. Sure, yes. We'd be happy
Yes.
to.
Won't the inventory you're taking help plan it out?
Yeah, it will, I think that will identify some of the issues
Yeah.
as well, yes. We'll see, and the nice thing is, you know, because we're working so closely with our consultant, you know, if, you know, we could ask him to do, if there's specific things, you know, maybe we'll take this opportunity to say, hey, we really, you know, we need a layer that, that addresses these things for us. And that's really one of the I'd say that was the, you know, probably the biggest reason we ended up going with that contractor is because he provided that kind of flexibility, so. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. All right then, let's move on to official map, talking about the select board change that happened last Wednesday, I guess a week ago. Alex, do you want to give a summary of?
Sure. So December 4th, that was last week, right? A week ago. Well, a week ago today. the select board had their public hearing on the proposed official map revisions that this commission had forwarded to them, and the proposed zoning changes regarding public open space design standards. And as was the case at your hearing in March, the lot 15 in Commerce Park on Commerce Street, community facility number 34 was the discussion item. There really didn't seem to be suggested changes to anything else on the official map. No one suggested the need for any changes to the zoning regulation revisions, and in fact, a couple of select board members, I think, said that, you know, the rest of it looked good. They liked it, and, you know, were hopeful that they could take action because it was a good package. So that was heartening. But the conversation about community facility 34 on lot 15 was similar to your hearing. There were quite a few folks there that were trying to make the case again that it was not a necessary community facility and had its issues and ought to be taken off the map. At the end of that conversation, the select board voted to take it off the map and rewarn another public hearing for late January or early February, which is they have to do. If they make any changes after they've warned it, they have to hold another public hearing. So that's required by statute. So so I will be updating the map to remove community facility 34 entirely, and then we'll have a public hearing. The date for that hasn't been set yet. However, the select board indicated interest in the planning commission's perspective. You know, I think it's safe to say they feel kind of bad when they change proposals that you give to them, but that's their job to be able to do that. So they're interested in your perspective on this revision that they've made. And probably more to the point, statute actually compels you to issue a report or some comments when they make a significant change like this. And so I included in your packets and put some on the table a copy of the required report that was put together in advance of your March hearing, which was just a few pages. They are stock questions that we are supposed to answer, and it basically says, what's the change and how is this going to further your town plan? It's the state's way of saying the planning commission has to think about whether these changes will conform to and help implement the town plan. So I wrote that report for you back in February before your March hearing, and we should revise it. We should draft a revised version that says, you know, several changes were made since this report was drafted, and here's what we have to say about those changes in regards to compliance with the town plan. I'm happy to draft that for you, but that's what tonight's discussion is for you to talk about that change and whether you think that has great import with regard to the implementation of the town plan. And just your general thoughts on it. I think the select board is interested, even though it sounds like they, you know, they did make a decision at that hearing to take it off the map. I think Phil said he came into the meeting on the 4th with an open mind, and I think he changed his mind because he had voted to go to the public hearing with that facility on, and he was one of the ones who voted to take it off. I think he said he'd want to go into the next public hearing with an open mind. There's only so long you can keep an open mind about these things when it's the same discussion over and over again. So I think their course is happening, but they're interested in getting your feedback, and statute says you're supposed to give some feedback. So two other notes that came up. Jeff can speak to one of them. At the meeting, Jeff wondered if the conversation that this commission has had about the 20,000 square foot cap on retail uses, which is in effect in most of the village growth area where retail is allowed, in other words, the village district and the village northwest district, but does not apply in the commercial district, both the Commerce Park commercial district and the one at Ballards. And so Jeff said, is there a way that, that could be wrapped into this so that we can maybe avoid repeating another large development project that doesn't fit on this site, and maybe doesn't fit in Hinesburg, larger retail. So that was one issue that got brought up. The select board voted to move forward with the proposed revisions without dealing with that. But I think they'd be interested in hearing, whether that's something you hope to talk about in the future. And then the other item that came up was Andrea Morganti had submitted some feedback to the select board the day before the meeting related to her concerns, which frankly she's had ever since we did the village growth area zoning in 2009, that development on the west side of 116 around Patrick Brook is in the flood hazard area, and by showing official map elements, a future road connection there, that we're essentially inviting developers to build in that flood hazard area, and that might be a bad idea. I think her suggestion in her comments was maybe it's time to reconsider that, and maybe we should wait to adopt the official map until we reconsider that. And Marilee, I think, felt that was something she was interested in as one select board member. And she had said, could we wait on this other proposal until maybe we talk about these issues? And again, the select board decided to, proceed with the process, but I think they'd be interested in, general thoughts or intentions that the planning commission might have to talk about that sort of bigger issue in the future.
It was a
I was
split
talking to
vote.
Scooter, our reporter, this morning, trying to figure out what the vote actually was. Was it 3-2? Okay.
Yes.
And if
Me and Meryl Lee were no, and the rest were
right, and I think both of you said that your no was principally based on your desire to see these other two issues addressed before you move the whole thing forward.
yeah, that was part of it, and two, planning commissions worked hard on it, so it just, anyway, it's 3-2.
Right, although I think Marilee was pretty clear at the meeting.
She was all about the water
she
and the
wanted
thing, and I
30
was about the
She wanted
20,000 square
community
foot.
facility 34 to come off the map. And that was a new thing, I think both Marilee and Phil changed their mind at that meeting. I can't speak for them, but that's my impression, because they both were clear about that. In any case, I've just set the table for you to talk about this. Go ahead.
I'm very much supportive of Andrea's points, particularly of building in the floodplain. Essentially, I would like to see item 14 and 15 removed from our map, and that's the road that connects the development in the Bissonnet land, Black Rock development, to the Creekside existing development and so forth. That's what cuts right through the floodplain, builds another dam essentially across that water flow, and I'm not going to approve anything that doesn't take that out. I will end up voting no if we don't take that out. I don't see a reason to leave it at all, no matter what kind of discussion follows this. I also feel that the 20,000 foot cap needs to be put on all of the commerce area, the Lot 15 area and the area at CVU Corner. Both should have a 20,000 foot cap. And Andrea also mentioned the connection between the village and the Texas Hill Road area, that was actually too specific. It shows a sidewalk all along the north side of the Richmond Road. And Andrea's idea, which I agree with, is make that a broader illustration that includes either side of that road. It's tough. If you drive that road, you'll see it is very, very tough to get a continuous sidewalk across there, particularly when you hit Iroquois truck body. That's the pinch point in particular. So I would like to see that discussed more in this committee. I think, Alex, there was some sense in the audience that we needed to make this decision before March of 2020, because there were statute limitations. We needed to have that decision made. And that's only because we had a public hearing about it. There's no requirement, from what I know, to update or modify or change an official map. There's
Right.
nothing in the statute that says you have to do this every so often. So that doesn't require it. And the zoning changes that got tied together with the official map as presented, the only reason we would have to act on those is because of the time period that proposal existed in, and we had to make a decision by the end of that time. If we didn't make that decision, it would be eliminated, but there's nothing that says we can't bring it back
Sure.
the same way.
There
So,
isn't a clock on these regulation,
Right, so-
in the sense of you must update them by a certain date, like the town plan has to be updated every 8 years.
none of that is a rule for those two items. And so I think we should be aware that we have time to discuss and consider other elements of the official map beyond Lot 15, item 34, is it? 34.
Yeah, 34.
Right. So
Well, I have
That's
to
my
say,
piece.
I disagree with that. I mean, we spent, what, most of 2019 working on this, on both parts of it.
And a portion of 2018. That's
Yeah.
when we really started with the public input, was in the
Yeah.
fall of 2018.
And to, stop the process. I mean, we've had these conversations, and
I don't
to
remember
stop,
conversations.
because no, because these are new discussions. The West Side Road. I mean, our dance card for 2020 is full already. And taking this back for however many months or portion of a year, I mean, at some point, I just feel like we need to move ahead with these, with the feedback we've gotten, move ahead with this. We can always come back to the official map and make changes anytime we want. We can make individual changes to that. With what Andrea brought up, I mean, we all saw, I think, the photographs from after those rains in October, at the end of October, and we all saw how Creekside was this island in a sea of of water, and I related to what Bob's talking about, there really does need to be some kind of a plan for this, because and how it's going to impact Patrick Brook, because if we bring in as much fill as Creekside had to bring in to build up those other surrounding areas, where's it going to go? Where's the water going to go? Is it going to go right into Patrick Brook in a straight shot? So there does need to be an overall plan. But looking at that and studying it, that is going to hold up the work, everything that we've done that once passed after the second select board hearing. Everything regarding the green space requirements. I mean, we'd be right back to square one with that. And I find that really frustrating after all the work we've done.
Well, as I said, Maggie, I feel that it is our responsibility to guide the town to do smart things, and building another bridge, another road, which essentially forms a dam for the water coming down from our foothills down to the La Platte, is irresponsible for this group to recommend doing that. And I don't need to go through the rest of the plan and stop that, but I feel we need to take out that connection shown on the plan as 14 and 15. We need, our comment back to the select board now, which will have to hold another hearing, should be take 14 and 15 out.
Well, but that means, you know, canceling that hearing, we need to go back to having discussions here on this change. I mean, I want to hear
I
from the
agree
rest
with
of
you,
the, I want to
Maggie.
hear
I
from the
totally
rest.
agree.
We have time to have that discussion.
And you had a chance before to have this discussion, and we elected not to. I agree
Which-
with what Andrea said going forward. I think that's a big issue for us to look into, or whoever's going to do it, going forward, but not to change this now. And the 20,000 square foot thing, we discussed that here and said that's another really big issue that we need to work on later. We've done that already at this board.
Yeah, and it's a.
And
Yeah.
it's a good discussion and I want to have it, but not to stop this. I agree. I totally agree with you, Maggie.
But this leaves it open, Marie, for developers to come in and propose buildings larger than
You knew this,
25.
John, when you voted for this. You knew this. Just because Andrea has spoken now, and I very much respect what Andrea has to say. She's a very intelligent woman. But we agreed on this already. We shouldn't be going backwards. Should be issues that we address upcoming.
Well, one suggesting is that, I mean, really what we're talking about now is our response, our memo, our response to the select board for their, for what they voted on
Yes.
a week ago. So, you know, one of our suggestions could be that this area and the effect of the development on Patrick Brook be studied, be taken seriously, and that they.
And we've sort of already said that
Yeah, I
at
think we
another
have.
meeting that we had to send, when we did the letter that I think Alex wrote.
Yeah, it
And
was
I
in
said,
response
let's
to-
send it to the select board, not to the DRB, or to both.
Yeah, and you did send it to both. It was based
Yes,
on the
we've
letter that
done that
Bob
already.
Himes and Meg Handler and Kate Kelly had submitted, saying a more study of the stormwater implications of all these multiple developments ought to be
Right.
looked at in aggregate.
Absolutely.
And you recommended to the DRB that they consider that, and then we forwarded it to the select board too, that it might be a good project to fund.
Yeah,
So,
because I tell you what, before we, I mean, we want to have some meat to our argument before we just present something, and I think if that starts with a select board, we'll carry a lot more weight than us coming in,
Right.
you know, just trying to make changes to the official map. We can always come back and make changes to the official map.
If I could say a couple things here to address a couple issues I've heard before the board. The first thing I'd point out is that the official map is not a statement of certainty. It's a reservation, right? Its primary purpose is to, put town interests, right, into the public spotlight so that if development is proposed, right, that land be set aside to meet the public interest. In this case, it happens to be a connection between the north and south side of Patrick Brook. It does not mean that that connection is a certainty, right? That would take a lot more. It would take right? Select board approval, it would take budgeting, many, many months of planning, et cetera. So I don't believe that taking 14 and 15 off the map really changes anything immediately. And if anything, it makes it more possible for a developer to put a number of things closer to Patrick Brook, because you're taking away a reservation. Number two, with regard to fill, not in the official map regulation, not something that belongs there. But if my memory is correct, we went through a whole revision of the flood hazard areas. And we put in some fairly significant language about addressing, what happens when fill is put in, what the analysis needs to be by the developer in order to allow that to happen. I think, by the way, that the town would have to go through that same sort of analysis if they want to develop in this area for road. But I think that language would really call into question the amount of fill that one could put into this area to develop. So I think there's protection there. With regard to lot 34, I have fought for lot 34 before this board before, in whole or in part, for a number of reasons that I've tried to express. However, that being said, I am okay with the select board's decision. They are the governing body. But what I would advocate for is that if you all recall, when we decided to reduce the amount of area that we were asking for number 34, right? I asked that acreage be put aside somewhere else, so that, because it was important to me that we actually reserve space, right? If not lot 34 somewhere, because we're going to have to, accommodate a larger population in the village area. If we are removing lot 34, perhaps not in this official map, but sometime in the near future, I would encourage the board to try and take up that same request, that, put some land somewhere else to make up for that. I understand that 34 is politically charged. In regard to 20,000 square feet, Marie's correct. We discussed this before. It's a very valid thing for this board to discuss. However, it is a significant, discussion item that the town will want to, be a real part of, given the history. Trying to slip that in along with official map, I think the board, would be wise not to do that.
I remember we started a discussion and never finished it about whether to extend that cap to the village as a whole, including commercial district, and also whether to have us, have a different size limit for grocery stores. And we never continued that discussion, so we need to get back to that.
One extra point I'd make on 14 and 15, and kind of slipped my mind. I have been an advocate for this in the past, and my concern here is that if there is not a second connection, i.e. first connection being 116, between the village northwest and the village proper, that we are essentially a one-road town, and we face issues with that today. Actually building out 14 and 15 may not be the right decision, but if it is taken off the map, if that's not the way to go, I think we need to consider, or the board needs to consider, what the alternative is to try and make Hinesburg a more connected village, right, without that particular route. That's an extremely tough challenge. This is the best connection of a number of even worse possible places for a connection.
Other comments from commission members?
Well, I definitely feel we need to discuss the 20,000 square foot cap. We did put it on hold, and it's time to get back to it soon, so that we don't have to face consequences like we've had for 9 years. And as far as 14 and 15, I remember talking with Alex the day after that last flood, how there was a pond right up beside Creekside, and I'm pretty sure you told me that some of that was due to the fact that whoever put in the lines, water and septic, over to the medical center did not put them in properly, that they were not as deep as they were supposed to have been. So I don't know if you remember saying that to me or
Yeah,
not.
to clarify, they were put in as per the plans, which were approved. The problem is twofold. The lines are, because of the need for gravity flow from Shelburne Falls Road all the way down to Farmall Drive, as the line gets closer to Farmall Drive, it's closer to the surface, and it requires that overburden of berm to keep it, from freezing and all of that. So that's part of why that berm is there. What wasn't done properly is that there are not enough culverts underneath that berm to drain stormwater from east to west across that field. So in the field to the west of Kinney Drugs, water has always moved, even before the Farmall Drive neighborhood was built, and it was the Lyman farm. Water would drain from east to west slowly across that field towards the La Platte. Well, now it hits the berm, and there's one culvert underneath it. And that's why we get so much ponding during a big rain event, because it can't pass that fast enough. Now, during the Halloween storm, I was actually in town Friday morning and, of course, Friday evening. And I came back into town Saturday and Sunday, and was able to take pictures of that. And it does drain, and it did drain. By Sunday evening, the ponding was gone. But there should be more culverts under that berm so that the ponding drains more quickly. The other problem is that it was development in the flood hazard area, and it never went through a review process for that. And that it still needs to. That's a compliance issue that I'm still trying to work with the landowners on. And as a part of that, there would be analysis of does this additional fill in the flood hazard area increase flood hazard elsewhere, and how so? How would it? So that's a review that's still yet to happen, and those were the real deficiencies with that installation of the water and sewer line, was the not enough culverts and the lack of the flood hazard review. To piggyback on that though, Brett Grabowski, who's the developer looking to develop the area that we're really talking about to the west of Kinney Drugs, which is entirely in the flood hazard area, proposed filling that in the same manner that the Farmall Drive neighborhood, the Creekside neighborhood, was filled, so a lot of fill. Tapering it actually as you get closer to the berm, so that the berm, there would be a road on top of that berm at that same elevation. And it's been several years now, but the DRB did review that, and that review included feedback from the state flood hazard management professionals, and the developer hired a reputable hydrogeological firm, Mylon and McBroom, which is the firm that Lewis Creek Association is working with extensively, and the town has worked with extensively, and they demonstrated that fill would not have an undue adverse impact, even though it's a lot of fill and it's all in the flood hazard area. And it's a very detailed study. There's a lot of engineering in there. My point is simply that the review of that fill for the berm, that doesn't have enough culverts under it, it appears that filling that entire area for that development will not have an adverse impact on upstream or downstream floodwaters and areas, per the Mylon and McBroom review anyways. And I think Andrea mentioned that when she made her comments to the select board. She said, I'm sure it could be engineered properly. She's seen these studies, so I know she's aware of them. She said, I'm sure it could be engineered, properly to meet our regulations, but she still has that concern that generally it's bad planning to have development in a flood hazard area, and she's right about that. It's generally bad planning, but the history of it is that, and Joe's still here tonight, so he remembers some of this. The history of it is that the Planning Commission in 2009 expanded these village area zoning districts and anticipated what then was called a West Side Road that would run parallel to 116 to the west in order to provide that connectivity. And the official map was part of that. The zoning change happened at the same time in 2009. Subsequent to that, several years later, FEMA required all towns in our area to update our flood hazard regs. And the Planning Commission at that time actually proposed to cancel to not allow any development in the flood hazard area anywhere in town. It was like, this is an option, and the state was actually pushing that to say this is sort of best practice, is to not allow development in the flood hazard areas. And so the Planning Commission proposed that. It went to the Select Board, and the Select Board said, we get it, but just a few years ago, we passed the zoning that called on us to enlarge the village, and it includes a connection across Patrick Brook so that we can have people walking, biking, driving, and not having to come out onto 116. And at that point, it was that Select Board that sent it back to the Planning Commission and said, rework this, come up with a set of standards that a developer can demonstrate that there won't be an undue adverse impact, so that there can be some limited development in the flood hazard area. And that's ultimately what got passed on second go around. The Planning Commission made the revision. We talked about this concept of no undue adverse impact, and sent a new proposal back to the Select Board, which they adopted, which does allow limited development in the flood hazard area. And that is what this zoning strategy, which the official map, reflects in terms of public infrastructure, that's how that came to be. It's been a long series of discussions over more than 10 years about all that.
I agree with what you're saying, except that the West Side Road predates the official map by many, many years.
True, yes, there was, back when Fred Hollenbeek was on the Planning Commission, when I first started, we had our first West Side Road steering committee meeting, so that was back in 2002. So yeah, that was an idea before the village growth zoning happened, before the official map. But I'll just repeat what I said at the Select Board hearing. I'm not convinced Andrea's wrong. Like, we could have made wrong decisions in the past about where we want to have development go, and we don't need to repeat those. But we did make those decisions. It was done with eyes wide open, and we do have zoning and an existing official map that contemplates that already. So I think it would be a significant conversation if we were to go back and downzone those areas that are within the flood hazard area, principally on the former Lyman property. I guess it's still the Lyman property. Barb Lyman owns it now, because that would, what we're talking about would change the zoning for that area of the village, and we have an active application for that property right now. We're expecting a preliminary plat application in several weeks for the build out of the rest of that property.
The horse left the barn when we allowed Creekside to be built.
Well, it was built within the flood hazard area or at least a portion of the flood hazard area,
Right.
Not entirely, but a portion of it on a lot of fill.
Well, the fact is, we could have that conversation. It
Yes.
certainly could be on the table. It's just that it would take a long time.
Yeah.
It would take, it would be a big discussion.
I do think that, to Jeff's concern about the 20,000 square foot cap and why it doesn't apply in the commercial district, that actually fits very nicely into your architectural and streetscape design standard conversation that you've been waiting for me to draft something so you could have, and that hopefully we will start in January. So I think you could roll that conversation and possibly that decision into that package of changes, which is rolling in the plan you want to work on in early 2020 and pass something to the select board so that as these big developments happen, we've got, even better design standards in place to the extent that, the timing syncs up. So that part I think is certainly within your existing work plan.
So, do any other commission members want to make comments on what's been passed back to us? I'd like to toss it out to the audience so we can hear some additional comments. Does anyone else have any on the commission comments? Okay.
Bill Marks. I also share Andrea's concerns, and I was actually, I had thought the planning commission had been addressing 20,000 square foot, so I was actually surprised when Jeff made that comment at the select board meeting that hasn't been dealt with. But so these are both important issues. I would like to kind of comment on Alex's discussion about these previous discussions about particularly the alternate east-west or north-south highway, the west end, and due respect to our forefathers and foremothers and their wisdom and what they came to, they did not have the information we do now. They did not were aware of the pending weather events that we are now very much aware of. We are seeing climate change. Our concern needs to address what we know now, thanks to the science community. We also have more information on Lot 15 and what its significance as a natural resource and its limitations as a development area. And we need to take that in consideration. And I don't know if to what degree we need to be concerned about future attempts to develop it that may be inappropriate. Personally, my concern is certainly at a much lower level now, but I don't know if I don't think I think we still need to be concerned. So I guess depending on what the answers to those questions, I think going ahead with what you have may be appropriate. I think we simply need to decide if waiting is okay. I do think that a West End highway, because it's on the map, and I'm not talking about the smaller ones in the 13 and 14 or whatever in the development, but at least the West End, it seems unlikely that a developer who's interested in developing out there is going to want to build a road to accommodate it. And I'm sure the town isn't going to do anything in the near future. But these are my thoughts. I don't have answers myself.
Ken Brown, just speaking on the 20,000 square foot issue, and eyes wide open, as Alex was talking about, that we could have settled this, 10, 11, 12 years ago, when we were in a select board meeting and the planning commission had plans for us to open up the zoning for the area where the Kenny Drug is on north to Balance, and we're reviewing that, and and we looked at the downtown section, and we looked at Commerce Park, and I said, why is the zoning different for Commerce Park? There's no limit on what the size you can build in Commerce Park. And Randy Volk said, oh, you don't need to worry about that because there's only one lot there, and half a dozen developers have looked at it, and you can't build anything there over the size of a barn because of what? It's wetlands, and it wouldn't support anything at all. So we didn't put any regulation there on limiting the size of a building that you could put in Commerce Park. So it just went right off our agenda. So it's time now, 11 years, whatever it is, later to do it, and to do it either at this juncture or in the proposal that you're working on for January, but to do it soon so that it doesn't become another 9 years later that you have to deal with it again. So that's why I'm here. Should have done it then.
So, Alex, I'm not sure how much of mine, I think it ties into the design, because I have a little more than just the 20,000 square foot to talk about. And I don't know, I sent you some packages, right, with some
Yep.
links and stuff. I'm not sure if that went out, but I can.
It didn't, no.
Okay.
But,
Well, can I show something on the slide when I?
yeah, sure.
So, oh, maybe I get it.
We could probably just plug you in.
There, I'll switch it right.
Yeah, I don't need the space.
So, just a little background. My computer hasn't died.
It's just asleep.
My daughter stole it.
While Jeff's getting his computer up, so Jeff sent, I think, both of us, Maggie, you and I, some thoughts about it and said, is it appropriate for me to come to the meeting and talk about the 20,000 square foot? And I said, yeah, absolutely. But one of the other things Jeff raised was the desire to have our regulations say something about franchise architecture. So, commercial buildings that look like they do everywhere else in the USA, because that particular business has a model with color schemes and size and shape. The one I think of immediately from my youth is the Pizza Hut with the red Pizza Hut roof and all that. But, McDonald's golden arches and the like.
We actually, before we started our discussion on design standards, each one of us took the zoning regulations from another Vermont town, and sort of did a summary for the rest of the commission, and we found language in a couple of towns, I think Brattleboro and Jericho,
I think Jericho too, yeah.
on corporate branding of architecture. So that's
So
gonna be
I
part of
told
our-
Jeff that. I said that'll be part of the architectural and streetscape design standards, some language about franchise architecture. How it will read and what this group who'll get to massage it will say about it is a whole different thing. But that particular issue is something that's on the table for discussion. But Jeff provided a bunch of helpful links to other communities that regulate it and other examples where if you say what you want and also what you don't want, commercial businesses, franchise businesses will comply. You just need to be clear and firm.
So if you send those links out, I don't need to.
Yeah, I can forward those along when we have that discussion about the design standards as a.
So for the 20,000 square foot, where that came up in the select board meeting, I could talk for how I voted, right? I don't really want to talk for other folks. My whole take on it was partially to kind of heal the wounds a little bit and find a happy middle ground where some folks are like, take number, 43 off of lot 15. And my take was, okay, well, then let's fix the I won't call it a loophole, but the past planning commissioners have said, it was an overlook. And, I think there was comments in the select board meeting similarly, which was, oh, well, with all the new stormwater regs, nobody can build on it. I think we've learned our lesson that don't assume. So, Whether it's tied to the official map, that's, I will let you guys make that decision. That was not my intent. Mine was more just about, we should look at doing that to standardize the regulations across the board to help avoid some of the issues. Because I believe in the very beginning, when that Hannaford project was brought up, the main concern was the size. So if that regulation had been there, this whole 12 years may not have even happened. I don't know. But that's why I brought that up, is just for clarification and standardization. As far as the franchise regs, which I'm glad to hear you're gonna talk about. So, I was all a proponent of the design change regulations when I was in the planning commission, and one of them was not blocking people from coming to town. Obviously, we want business in town, but it's about, if you look at some of the links I gave you, it's about self-reliance and about keeping the character of your town and things that I've heard us talk about. And some folks are just, I don't want any of it, and that's one way to take. But a lot of it's just about, when you come to town, you're welcome to town, but blend into our character, blend into Hinesburg, be part of us, right? And so that's, come on in, but you may not look like what you're used to. Or you can take it to the other part. I had some links in there from CNN and another place that talk about certain types of stores that can have economic impact on your community. Dollar stores, for example, where they've come in and they do cause economic harm. But I'm not sitting here saying, ban Dollar General, I don't think you could. So I just want you to think about that. Just, a lot of these conversations and a lot of the what's the word I'm looking for, the tension between the town members has been around, what is our town gonna look like? And what are we gonna be 10, 20, 50 years around? And I appreciate Rolf, even though he doesn't hear that, what he put on Front Porch Forum, I think talked to it well. So I guess I'm just asking to please consider that sort of franchise and look, feel, and then go into things we talked about, like drive-throughs, and there's a lot of different zoning regulations that have been written that you could pick and choose from depending on what feels right for us. So I just want us to really think about that, and the character, the sizes, the look, the feel, the walkability that goes into streetscapes, and how you can do that too. I know we talk about green space percentages. There are some communities that say you need to have bike parking percentages based on what you're doing. So there's all different ways to go through it, and I wanted to raise that up and bring that to your attention.
And so in response to what you said, and you haven't been here for a while now,
I
because
know.
you're in the select board,
Yeah.
and that's great, but we have talked about a lot of these things. I just want you to know that we have, and I think that we're well on our way to coming up with things that you're talking about,
Good.
honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody else can speak up and say I'm wrong, but I'm dreaming, but we have talked about a lot of these issues.
And I'll admit, I haven't watched every
Right, no, and
commission. I'm sorry.
you don't have to, but I just want you to know that
Okay, good.
we are,
Yeah.
I feel, as a board, on that track.
Perfect. Good. Yeah. It's just I like design, so.
No, I
But I'm glad to hear that, and
hear
I'm
what you're
glad,
saying.
you could have just told me that.
I did tell you that.
No, I'm glad you came, I'm not putting down what you said.
No.
I'm glad you came, but I just want to reassure
Yeah.
you, we are on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so we've already got the drive-through thing with restaurants.
Yeah, I think that was towards the end
Yeah,
of
that
when I
was-
was
yeah.
here. We talked a little bit about that stuff.
But yeah, keep an eye on the discussion as we take
will.
a deeper dive into the
Okay.
design standards, because that's gonna get fun.
Yeah, I think, Jess, we've looked at it, we haven't had a deep discussion
Sounds
on these
like it'll
things
be a
yet.
January
Just touched
Okay.
on it, you know?
Yeah, they're really waiting on me. The stumbling block for the last several meetings has been me. They did a lot of early work, and so now I'm trying to pull that all together and write a first draft that then they can pull apart and work on. I just haven't been able to get to it, so
Okay.
we will, and early 2020, hopefully January. Hopefully the next meeting, actually, the first meeting in January. Because we're planning a public hearing and the second meeting in January on the water and wastewater allocation scoring system,
Yep.
which is a whole different thing
Well,
that
we
we've been
also-
talking about for a while.
Yeah, we also have to get through the contractors' yards.
And there's that too, yep.
Yeah, so.
Well, thank you, I appreciate it. I also just wanted to be here because we did have a select board meeting which did change the map, and just in case there was any clarifications or whatever as to why people voted how they did and what it was all about, so.
So if I can call you out on that, to clarify your position, you voted no for the change, but am I reading you right that tonight you're saying you're not necessarily against
So-
that?
No, so what I said in the meeting was, I was looking for, some sort of, agreement in the middle that makes the most people happy, right? So there was a lot of people who were against that being on the map. I would say they probably leaned in the pro-Hannaford space, right? We all know where that went. And, I was trying to find something that would have been a happy medium, like, fine, okay. I admit this was in here, I agree with what's on the official map. I was part of this commission, we worked hard on it, there's been tons of talk on it. So to just, you know, whether it's through, I don't wanna talk about it anymore, or I don't wanna deal, I don't know. But, I was trying to find a happy medium of like, okay, let's take that off the map, but let's also do this,
Right.
so that everybody's kind of got a little something, right? That's what I was trying to do, compromise. And then when it came down to the actual vote, I just wasn't happy about, because we couldn't do the zoning regulations, because that would take too long, and da-da-da-da, so it was just a straight, I'm gonna remove the work of the planning commission, and I wasn't comfortable with that, so I said no. I wanted to come back to you guys, so, is what it is, right, but it was a split vote, so it wasn't, a whole thing, but anyway,
So we can still tolerate your presence then?
I suppose.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll try.
But the tomatoes were.
Okay, well, thanks for hearing me, you know, reiterate things that you're already working on, I appreciate it.
I feel like we are, I do.
I'm always here to, you know,
Well, but
stall and
honestly, I don't think that, at least I wasn't thinking that the 20,000 square foot cap was something you were gonna deal with explicitly in these building and streetscape design standards. So if it is, cause I do think it fits in there, but that's really your call. I'm gonna draft these design standards based on all the other things you talked about, and if you wanna insert that in and drive a conversation about not just better building design, but also this cap, we can do that. That'll be your call. I think this is good feedback to hear that you've got at least one decision maker who thinks you ought to get on with, well, sorry, two, who think you ought to get on that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no, I think we have made the comment, I've made the comment that we need to address that in this, I mean,
In this
it was
batch.
Yeah, it was a conversation that was postponed at least 4 years ago. So, yeah, it's time to address that.
and I'll be really, really frank, I would just hate to see another application come in that causes another 12 years of consternation in the
Yeah.
town, that type of thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
To be honest with you, Jeff, I think the most likely application that will drive controversy on the commercial front will not be another 30,000 plus square foot store. It'll be a Dollar General.
Yeah, I know.
And it'll be 10,000 square
Yeah.
feet, which is well under any cap we would ever think about. And, we better get these design standards done, like,
So-
Yeah,
so that we
exactly.
can make sure that when that comes, it looks
So-
and fits in Hinesburg.
right, and so there's been a lot of the, if we're talking about the Dollar Generals, which I'll just be open, that, yeah, I think South Hero did a nothing bigger than 3,000 to try to stop one or whatever. But I guess all I'd ask is, in the links I sent you, and you can put them in the public packet, there's a link to CNN, and you can just Google search it, and they go into a lot of data about why towns, even cities, New York, San Francisco, are concerned about some of that, just
Yeah,
because
right.
of the economic impact.
no, it's a
So-
huge impact,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
NPR had a thing this morning, I think, on Dollar General, they're building 600 new stores this
Yeah.
year, and several towns, municipalities have built-in regulations that
Yep.
restrict Dollar General
Like,
building.
some of them are, I think they like to build within 5 miles of each other. Some people just say you can't have more than one in 10 miles or 20
So,
miles.
Alex, I think it was within the past 5 years that one of those stores.
Yes.
Looked
Tried to
kind
do
of-
that.
So
There's
we-
been two.
So we had,
Okay, so-
that's right, we've had.
So why did they walk away?
So-
What was it in our regs that made them walk away?
The first one was, after Kinney's had been built, several years after Kinney's had been built, Dollar General came and said they were interested in building on the north side of Patrick Brook, right on 116. So very much like Kinney's, just on the north side of Patrick Brook. And we said, they didn't make an application. They were doing their due diligence. So they met with our office and were working with the landowner. But they didn't make an application. And when we sat and talked to them, we said, yes, it is zoned for that. Please know that this community is very sensitive about, sense of place and building design, even though we might not have the most robust standards on that front. So, be aware of that. And oh, by the way, nothing happens in this village growth area unless it's it's connected to the pedestrian network, meaning sidewalks. And we told them, we said, this area to the north of Patrick Brook is not connected by sidewalk, and the Kinney Drugs developer has a condition in his 2010 approval that he is supposed to extend the sidewalk north of Patrick Brook along the full frontage of his property. He was given a pass not having to do that back in 2010 because there was nothing to connect it to at that point. But what we told Dollar General was, even though he's on the hook to do that, we will not let you open your store unless that sidewalk exists. And so they said, well, wait a minute, he's supposed to do it. Can't you just make him do it? And I said, we will definitely try, but I can't guarantee that that commitment's going to be honored in a time frame that works for you, Dollar General. So I said, you may end up having to build it or contribute to it if you want to open your store, in a particular time horizon. And that level of uncertainty for them was just too much. And that I believe that's the reason why they walked away. The second idea or proposal was down near Marie's in South Hinesburg. So the Hinesburg General Store went under several years ago, as you remember. And Rob and Ann Frost have been continuing to keep it alive as a retail outlet for their Vermont Well and Pump business, to sort of hold on to that use because it's a non-complying commercial use on that side of the road. And Dollar General approached them and thought that might make for a nice site for Dollar General. I was actually kind of excited about it. I thought it would be a good site for that, but in the end, they decided not to pursue the project. I don't know why, actually. I don't know if it was the condition of the site or the building or some other reason, but Rob and Ann were very excited about that, thought that was going to be a sale for them, and then it fell through.
Some of these businesses that we might not choose in our town do move into other buildings and not build a new location. Like what happened with Target in South Burlington,
Right.
for example.
So if you take a look at some of those franchise regulations that I said, it's not only is it design, look, and feel, it also, talks about you can only have so many of this type of store within X. And I think a lot of communities are concerned because of the economic impact in terms of health of food that comes in. It just causes issues beyond just, I don't want one in my backyard.
Right.
So I just asked you your research, right? And I'm trying to be, with everything that we know with the last Hannaford, let's get in front of it because it's clearly gonna come. So let's just talk about it.
We need to make progress with these design standards for sure.
Yeah.
Because smaller stores are coming, not so much bigger
And
stores.
it's funny, and I don't wanna take up any more time because I know we're late, but during the Hannaford proposal 5 years ago, I asked them, why aren't you going small like the Walmarts and other people that have small stores? They said, oh yeah, we don't do that. And they do now.
But they do.
Yeah, now they do, so.
They do.
Right. You were on the planning commission when you noted that they started their first 20,000 square foot Hannaford model in Maine, and now they have two of them, I think.
So I don't wanna take any more of your time.
Okay.
Thank you for your time, appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, yeah.
Sort of a,
Go ahead.
sort of a question and overarching, I guess, all these discussions that Jeff was just saying is, has the planning commission already made a request to the select board, or if not, will they consider it, to budget money for expert witnesses to consult, for the DRB to consult with?
That's not what we do, we plan.
Okay.
There is money in our planning and zoning budget for professional consultation. It's a small amount, it's only $750.
Yeah, it's nothing.
So the way our regs work is that, and this changed just a few years ago, the DRB is empowered to hire independent experts at the developer's expense. So the idea is, if we have a question regarding a compliance issue and the DRB is not comfortable with what the developer is providing for information or would like a check on that, they can actually make that happen and bill the developer.
Right, well, my concern, of course, is we've certainly learned from the Hannaford's thing that the large developers will have hired guns and they will find ways of testifying to whatever suits their purpose, whether it's using false standards, questionable standards, but it's something, this is types of technical information that is just lay people on these commissions don't know the questions to ask, don't know if the right sources are being addressed, and we need to have our own.
Yeah, that's really a DRB thing, I would say.
Okay, but it's when, Alex, you say compliance issues, you mean whether what they're saying they.
So for example, on traffic is a technical issue, and as we saw in the Hannaford review, it seems like you can put 3 traffic experts in a room and they all have slightly different opinions about what trip generation of something, will create and all the rest of that. So in that project, the DRB hired an independent traffic engineer to review all of that. And that traffic engineer actually helped us draft the original decision back in 2012. So yeah, that happened with regard to traffic. It could also happen with regard to stormwater, although we have someone with a lot of expertise on staff now on that front, Mitch Sipes, our development review coordinator. It could happen on our design standards. So if a developer's making the case that, this meets your design standards in X, Y, Z, and the board feels like they need a second opinion, they could get one and bill it to the developer.
Well, I just have to respond to that from having experienced the whole Hannaford's thing and knowing inside what the RGH experts provided both on stormwater and traffic was apparently different and beyond what the DRB would have had, whether from their own experts or wherever else they got their information, because if it had not been for the RGA experts, we wouldn't have gotten to the truth.
Yeah.
Is my very strong belief on
I don't want
this.
to argue that. I'm not sure you're right. I think Mitch was a new person on this review during the second go around, and he expressed concerns about that stormwater plan from the first moment he looked at it, without reading anything from RGH. But I'm not saying they didn't add expertise. I'm just saying that there were reasons why the DRB denied it on that ground.
And I also know that staff people have a harder time confronting, because it's very controversial and you make a lot of enemies.
It's definitely a benefit to have an independent engineer take a look at it. I agree. And yeah, the DRB's empowered to do that.
Well, okay, it's just something I'd like to see done more aggressively and could save the whole town a lot of controversy. And
Okay, so,
okay.
Catherine, do you have a comment?
No, I don't. I came to listen.
So our options with the select board's change, we can accept the change, right?
Yeah, maybe I misspoke. The purpose of tonight's discussion is not for you to make a vote on anything. It's out of your hands at this point. It is fully in the select board's hands. What you are required to do is issue words, a report that says, okay, we proposed this and felt that it complied with the town plan and we had reasons for proposing it. The select board has now made a revision to that, and the statute anticipates you looking at it again and saying, does it still comply with the town plan? Do we still think this is, furthering the goals and action items in our comprehensive plan? That's really all you need to do. But the select board also invited you to comment on, just more generally,
Right.
on the change to, community facility 34 and these other two issues about the 20,000 square foot cap, and the development in the flood hazard area. So you're not required to, and you actually don't have any power to change the trajectory that the select board is on, but they do want your feedback, and they are holding another public hearing, and they'll listen to both you and the rest of the community at that time.
Well, we've already heard, you know, well, first of all, the cap is gonna be part of our discussion of design standards.
So that's an easy thing for me
That's
to
an
write
easy
up
thing.
and inform them about, yes.
So, Joe already mentioned regarding 34, that, we would like to see an equivalent amount of green space somewhere in the village center.
Well, Joe said
So,
that.
he did.
Is everyone on the same page on that front?
He did say that.
He said that?
He did.
Is that something that?
Are you
That
all in
comment-
are you all in agreement
If
about
we
that? Because
were-
I know
Yeah,
you
I mean,
were, I know you were the last time we shrunk 34. We added it to the facility on the Quinn property.
We did. I mean, I, you know, personally, you know, it's a huge disappointment because just geographically speaking, it's an ideal place for, you know, and it's an ideal location for open space. So, but yeah, I agree with that. I think that, we should be looking for another, I don't, you know, I've been looking at the map and I don't know where else that would be. We've already,
Beyond what Maggie's saying? My question is, because you were explaining, really, we can't do much, is that an acceptable comment to make back to the select board?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm not sure how you feel about the bigger question that statute sort of compels you to answer, which is, did the revision that the select board may make undermine how this official map helps implement and conform with the town plan? Or was this is this change essentially not, you know, does
Not
this change
kosher.
not throw a monkey wrench in the wheels? Does the official map without this facility still do the job of implementing the town plan? That's the question that I think you should have in your report. But if you want to make a more general comment about it would be nice to see this reflected in another community facility, or having one of the ones on the map be larger to make up for this, you can certainly make that
And
comment.
that was my question.
Procedurally, just know that they're not in a position to necessarily do that. They have decided to warn a public hearing on the map, just the way you presented it to them, without community facility 34. So that's what their public hearing is going to be on. If they were to say increase the size of community facility 36 on the Quinn property, or 33 on the Blumstrom property, or 31 or 2 on the Haystack property, they would need to hold another hearing and make these revisions and talk about those revisions, and then hold a hearing on that. So what I'm not clear on procedurally is, are you recommending that this be something that be considered for another official map change sometime in the future?
yeah, I don't,
Or
yeah.
that this official map that they are having the public hearing on be rejected?
No, I'm saying it's a comment about future,
Future revisions?
future revisions,
Okay.
yeah.
I
agree with
But not, no, I don't want anything to slow down or to prevent this proposal moving forward.
Right, so I hear that is not the unanimous,
No, and I know John.
opinion. John has a very different one,
yeah.
but it sounds like the majority of you are on that wavelength.
And what was I'm having a brain funk. What was the other one?
I just have a quick comment. When we divided up 34, I thought some of our thinking was in support of the DRB's decision on the stormwater traffic issues, and that we were supporting them as well as what we wanted to see happen there. That was just,
I didn't think that. I thought it was just our decision that we made, because there are a lot of wetlands there. I mean, I think we all agreed on that, and we
Yeah.
still do.
Yeah, my recollection was that 34 was drawn in such a way as to capture
To look
the
at
bulk of the
those.
wetlands on the
Right,
site.
exactly.
And also one area closer to the post office that is not wetland, with the idea that this future community facility would actually preserve most of the wetlands, and then maybe have a small public recreation area of some sort on that non-wetland portion. That's my memory of why it was drawn the way it was.
That was what I thought.
It is ultimately a future community facility. I mean, that's why it's on the map. And of course, you know, the Hannaford project is now moot, so. Don't have to worry about the
so
DRB.
wasn't it mentioned at the meeting the other night that if it's removed from this map, it goes back to the 2009 map, and the whole place is a community facility?
If
Can't even say it.
the select board does not act on this, or if they deny it, then we still have our existing official map. And that existing official map identifies the whole property as a community facility.
So I
But I
did hear
thought
that.
because the town voted to not procure that property, that went away.
So that is a misunderstanding. I have heard that from a couple of people, and I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is that that's not the case. No, so that means that for that specific application, the Hannaford application, the select board's inaction on pursuing acquiring an interest in the property means that they have the option of having it re-reviewed with no mention of the official map.
Okay.
But another project, let's say
Tomorrow.
a Dollar General
Tomorrow.
or a new
Anything.
anything, yes, a new boutique, Mitch always says movie theater. That's what he.
Oh, God, yes.
So a new movie theater on that lot would still have to comply with the official map, and then we would have that. If they didn't, we would, and it were denied on that grounds, and the select board would have another opportunity
Got
to
it.
say, do we want to do something about it now? Yeah, it doesn't go away because they didn't act that
Okay.
one time.
Good to know.
And that need to act applies to everything on the official map.
Right, all the
if,
facilities shown.
all the facilities
If a project
shown-
is denied on the basis of that,
not
then
meeting
this,
that facility, then the town has to put their money where their mouth is.
yep,
So we're
And if
back
it's
to
not,
the vagueness of that, or the non-specificity of that description of the community.
well,
This
yeah,
is-
and that, Andrea asked me some
Which we were
questions about, similar to what John was saying, like, is there a time frame? Do we really have to hurry up? What are we losing by putting off this new official map? And my response was, no, there's no time crunch in the sense that, a requirement that we update the official map, but we do lose out in the sense that the current official map has what it was perceived to be not a lot of specificity, not enough specificity, and this proposal, especially with the community facility descriptions, hopefully provides that, so that developers going forward will understand.
Do you think the select board was aware that night, a week ago, that it would be reverting to the prior map? I'm not sure that,
It was mentioned at the meeting.
Was it?
I think so,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think it was focused on, but I at least some of them understood that,
do
yeah.
you think the audience understood that?
I think so.
Probably
they
not. No, I think, yeah, because like
I think
Marie
that's
said,
a
that
real-
question about, I thought this was all moot because the select board didn't act. I think some folks are still thinking that's the case when it's not, and, yeah.
That's not good.
this isn't directly related to what we're talking about, Maggie, but I looked through some of the past history on how we learned what the town would like to have. and we did a survey, and we got almost 500 responses. It was about 6 years ago,
Okay.
and that's reported in documents in the town. I think it's appropriate to consider doing another survey. 6 years ago, the conditions were very different than what we have today. And we need to ask that question again of the town. And there were questions, specific questions in that survey, and the response was pretty good, almost 500 people.
But
Yeah,
was that the Survey Monkey?
Yeah, we've done several surveys over the years, but
'Cause
we
those are
haven't,
not
we haven't
accurate.
done one
This
since
was a really
2015.
This was a
Yeah.
big, this was
Who wrote that?
lots of questions.
We did.
You did?
It was done
Because I thought
internally.
it was excellent, and I do agree with you
Yeah,
about that. John.
and we need to ask those
Be nice.
questions, and maybe some others in our time now.
Yep.
I agree. It's been on my reminder on my phone for the last 6 months to repeat some of the town plan survey questions that we asked when we updated the town plan this last go around. So the 2017 town plan was a major rewrite and reformatting and all of that. And John's right. We started off that effort with a survey that got good response. And I remember trying to craft the questions so that they would be easily repeatable. Questions like, do you think Hinesburg is well prepared for, the future, 5 to 10 years of new development and the like? And, what do you think about recent development that you've seen? Do you like it? Do you not? So I've been wanting to repeat those questions. I just haven't taken the time to put out another survey. It always seems like when I think it's the right time to do it, some controversy pops up, and I'm afraid it's going to get tarred and feathered as the wrong time to ask these questions or something. Maybe now that the Hannaford thing is over,
Right, maybe.
that maybe there's more air in the room to do just what John's talking about.
There's never the perfect time.
No, it's true.
Can't avoid,
Well, I don't know that
some people will be pleased.
that
other
we're
people
giving you
will
in
not.
the 4 minutes we have left, or 6
Here's
minutes.
what I heard. I heard you want to tell the select board that what do you want to tell the select board? You want to tell the select board that you plan to address the 20,000 square foot cap as a part of your architectural and streetscape design standards, which is the project you are actively working on with 2 others, and will be addressed in 2020. That you agree that development in the flood hazard area is problematic, and that you would like to think about that as a larger picture, but not as, that you have your plate is full right now.
Well, I wonder what people think about this, about recommending that they take action on the bigger picture of development in that area and its effect on the.
Well, haven't we already asked them that in that letter that we asked Alex to write?
I don't think it was
I didn't
anything
read
that
the
they're.
letter, though.
Well, and I doubt it was anything that they were gonna act on. I'm not sure we even.
Well, I
Requested
think,
that
I
they
think,
take
Maggie,
action.
that, just as I was trying to give some feedback to Bob, I'll give the same feedback to you.
Right.
If you tell a board, that is waiting for proposals from you to figure out something that's really in your domain, they're gonna just say, help us figure that out. We don't have the horsepower to do that, which they don't. The select board right now is completely consumed with budget and all that jazz. So I think if you want the town to think more about the implications of development in that area, especially within the flood hazard area, you should do it. This committee should do it, not the select board.
Another subcommittee?
Maybe, or just, put it on your docket and say that's gonna be the next project after we finish the 3 we're working on.
But
So
it-
maybe
but-
2021, I don't know.
But we don't have the money to, commission a report on, a study of.
So that's why you budget for it, right? So we're just passing through the budget period now for the next fiscal year. Maybe next year at this time, we're in front of the select board with a proposal for significant funds, and we're gonna apply for matching grants to do more of that work.
That's 2 years away. Or
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, it's up to you, on your priorities, but you do have 3 birds in hand right now.
I
You
know.
have
Yeah,
the
we're-
allocation scoring system, which everyone thinks is important and needs to be done, you know, in the next year before we have new capacity. You have these building and streetscape design standards, which everyone wants to see happen already, so
Before
we're ready
the
for the next
applications come in.
Dollar General, and,
Yeah. And the contractor's yard.
and you have the
subcommittee.
contractor's yard thing. So,
Yeah.
you know, if you want to get closure on those three, I think
Yeah.
you gotta
Yeah.
be honest about the fact that you can't do this other thing, at least for a little while.
Yeah.
In any case, so I heard the 20,000 square foot cap, you want to address that. I heard that you understand the flood hazard issues are significant and you'd like to study those, and it's just a matter of when and
Yeah,
with
it's
what
a big,
resources, because it's a big lift.
conversation. Yeah.
And I heard that that if community facility 34 is to be removed from the map, that you'd like to that you will take a leadership
We will
role
be
in the
looking
future
for-
to look for a replacement area.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you deem it necessary when you get to that conversation.
Just subtly enough passive aggressive, you know, like, you know.
In a perfect world.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I would encourage you
Yeah,
all.
in your backyard.
What I would
Mr.
encourage you
Pouch.
all to do in advance of the first meeting in January, because you'll have that meeting in January to review whatever I draft
Right.
before I send it to them. Do that, but also when you do that, look at the town plan and look at the official map and come to that meeting with an opinion as to whether the removal of this facility requires a response, you know, or if this is not the end of the world and it's, you know, it's a policy decision that's not going to change the implementation of the town plan, because that's the statutory requirement that you're supposed to be addressing.
Right. I mean, I
I don't want to tell you what
personally
your
did-
opinion is
yeah,
on that.
I mean,
I want you to figure that out. So just
Yeah.
think about it. No.
yeah.
So just think about that. And like I said, I'll draft something for your first meeting in January, so you'll have that and a goose ahead of that meeting to think about what I just said.
I mean, regarding that, and we do need to move on, but, you know, is it a critical location that's been lost? And, you know, personally, when I look at the map and I see the location, you know, it seems pretty critical to me. Just, you know, the center of the village, really. But again, I personally don't want to hold up the work we've done. So, so that's not really. So you're gonna draft something, and we'll do a final.
I will draft
Okay.
something, and you'll
right.
review it at your next meeting and make
Okay.
sure it squares with what you want it to say.
All right. And Joe, you can write something if you don't want to. You can do a call-in when you're watching live. Okay, everybody. Well, let's go ahead and, so unfortunately, we didn't get to, the contractor yard subcommittee update. So we'll push that off for the next, we'll talk about agendas if there's gonna be
So
that'll be
next
time
Can I ask one quick question?
next year, yeah.
Just on something I see on the front
Yeah.
page. It mentions 1 ton or less trucks. What about the trucks that are more than 1 ton? Like, you're talking about a 1 ton pickup, which is a very small truck, and everybody who is a contractor has
Right.
much bigger trucks.
So, the part of the definition, that part of the definition, if I'm remembering right, is to leave a big enough, I don't wanna use the word loophole, but to allow, somebody who has a lawn mowing business, to not have to, not fall under the,
A couple
The
small
regs.
pickups or something like that. So the intention was to try and we struggled with some of this proposal. The intention was to, you know, count larger vehicles in this, you know, total count that's allowed. and provide some exclusion for, smaller pieces of equipment that are used, or the person who's operating a very small business, as Maggie, gave the example, a lawn mowing business, or even an extremely small excavation business, some small amount of,
Snow plow.
yeah.
Yeah, the way
some-
Bobcat.
so-
to not prevent, one thing we had talked about was oftentimes, in particular with these types of businesses, you start out working on your own. Doing your own jobs, having some small equipment, and you slowly build up. And we didn't want to prevent those types of businesses from growing right from the beginning because of the regulation, so giving some room there. And I remember we had also talked about like the appropriate size to include. Like there was a little bit of discussion as to what 1-ton truck was and what like the appropriate size. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember we went back and forth a little bit, and we were like, what is a 1-ton truck? And I think that was one of the reasons why we wanted to bring it to the board was to get some more feedback on it.
So then would it be all of the trucks must be 1 ton or more?
Or less.
So we're
can't
trying
be
to-
bigger.
We're trying to exclude people from having to come under these guidelines, right? So if you had, 3 vehicles and they were, a ton or less, right? You wouldn't be a contractor here, right?
It'd be a home occupation possibly.
Right.
Yeah, so I think it's a wording issue, James, because I had the same question when I read it. The way it reads is it says, a lot shall be considered a contractor's yard if it includes any of the following. And that first number says outdoor storage of trucks, principally used off-site, which must be 1 ton or less. And so it seems to say that if you're a contractor's yard, you have to be 1 ton or less, and that wasn't your intent.
No.
Your intent was to say just the opposite. You're not a contractor's
Right.
yard
Right.
if all your trucks are 1 ton or less.
Right.
You're just a simple home occupation. So I think we just need to adjust the wording to make
Tweak the
that more
wording.
clear.
So it's a good
At
question.
one time, I had proposed some wording that was like, you have equipment in excess of the following, and there were a couple bullets, underneath that, so.
But that's
Did struggle with wording, Alex.
right. So I can help you with that part. But James, I think their intent was to try to say, if it's all 1 ton or less and you're only this number of vehicles, then you have an easier pathway that's just a home occupation. You don't even have to go through the contractor's yard provision. And if you are over that, then you are a contractor's yard and you go through this.
Also a quick question about grandfathered yards. Yards that were previously grandfathered shall be considered grandfathered.
Yeah, there
What
used to be 2.5
yards are-
pages.
There's several in town right now.
In fact, every contractor's yard in town is grandfathered.
That's existing right now.
Yeah, because they're,
No,
well-
that's not true.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
pretty much.
pretty much, and they're,
when,
Through the last
when
episode
Whitetail
years ago,
came in,
they weren't.
Mitch
yes,
said,
yes.
you
the-
don't meet the standards.
Right.
Yeah,
In
the
other words,
ones,
you're not grandfathered, as an
weren't.
example,
Right.
Maggie.
I mean,
Yes.
to be grandfathered,
I think
right?
that's the
I think
only
my understanding is
example
you
that we
had to
know
be
about.
pre-existing when the original regulation was there,
Correct.
and you had to apply to be grandfathered.
Yes.
Yes.
All right?
And they
So-
were.
If you met both of those things,
Yeah.
you are grandfathered. That does
Yeah.
not say that every contractor's yard in the
No.
town is grandfathered.
Right, no, you're right. So, they don't have to, they're in like Flynn, unless they wanna change
Yeah, if they
something
want to
and get bigger.
expand or whatever.
Right.
But just as an example, I mean, they followed exactly what Dan was describing. They started off small with a pickup truck. They put sand on my driveway by having someone in the back of the truck
Sure.
with a shovel
Yep.
throwing sand out. Now, they have several large trucks.
Right.
They have a sand distribution system mounted in one of the trucks.
Mm-hmm.
They have grown,
They have.
and that happens.
Yep.
So do we have time next meeting to go over the contractor's yards?
Yeah, we'll
To at least get
I will talk to you about it, cause
Okay,
we wanna
alright.
do design standards, we wanna finish
I know.
this official map commentary for the select board and do contractor's yard. So,
Yeah,
you and I will need to work on whether that's all possible in the first meeting.
we'll talk. Okay, so, minutes, does anyone have any changes to the minutes for November 21st? Does anyone have a motion?
I motion that we accept the minutes of, what's the date? November 21st, as written, as submitted.
We're all eager. All in favor? Aye.
Abstain.
Okay. And, other business and correspondence?
One little thing, so I was supposed to present the planning budget to the select board next week, and that got moved to 2 days ago, so I presented it on Monday. Yeah, essentially, I hadn't drafted my very flowery memo to go with the spreadsheet, but maybe they appreciated not having to read that, I don't know.
Nobody wants to tell you.
Right. In any case, I did present the budget. It did have money in the special projects line item for local match for the grants that we normally apply for each year, the municipal planning grant and the regional planning commission's unified work program. And yeah, so that happened. The select board at these initial presentations is usually very supportive and just trying to understand it. In January, they'll come back and start hacking things out because the overall aggregate budget from everyone's proposals tends to be larger than what they're willing to support. So just a heads up that happened.
I actually have one quick thing. Sorry to go back to the contractor's yard real quick. I know when we had the first meeting, when Whitetail was here, I forget what their names were.
Chad and Arnold?
Yeah, we had talked about also speaking with them. When we
Outreach, yeah,
did come up with a proposal,
right.
when would be a good time to do that? Would it be at our next meeting, or is there a different way that we should go about doing that?
Yeah, we talked a bit about that. I mean, maybe having the planning commission have a run through first and then seeking feedback from contractors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would make a lot of
members.
sense because it gives your subcommittee a reality check with the whole committee so that James and others can ask questions like, this
Right.
doesn't read right. And then once it's been tweaked, then I think it makes sense to reach out. So we can talk about that at the first meeting in January, how we want
Okay.
that to work. Whether you want to do that at a planning commission meeting in February or whether you want to do that outside of the planning commission meetings more informally. There's a couple different ways to do that, but I think it's critical that we do it.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it up, so we
Yeah.
don't forget about that.
Yeah,
I
that for
think
sure
they-
needs to be a part of.
They will have very valuable feedback on what kinds of equipment they use and
Yeah.
its tonnage and
Yeah.
all that jazz.
Alrighty then, any other business and or correspondence?
Alex, you had put a note out that we had received, in fact, a grant that we had applied for.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. I'm sorry.
That's a
Yeah.
very big deal.
Hooray,
because
good
we're gonna
news.
get
Pretty
some money.
pictures.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. Yeah, that was, and I kept getting congratulations last week when I attended a planning thing from all these state people who are like, "Hey, you got your grant, way to go!" So yes, we applied for a municipal planning grant and to help hire a consultant to draw the pretty pictures to go with the building and design, building and streetscape design standards that we're working on, and that was fully funded. So.
Excellent.
We have funds to bring a consultant on board, and we haven't received a municipal planning grant in many years, so hooray.
Yay.
That village center designation that we got, which gives you a few priority points, maybe that put us over the top.
Yeah, maybe they were just feeling sorry for us.
Could have been that too.
Okay then. Alright, unless anyone has anything else,
There's cake.
there's cake. So we better close this meeting down. We're done. Thank you, everybody.